Welcome, everyone, to Building SaaS on AWS. My name is Christopher Logan. I'm your host today. I am a Senior Manager for Solutions Architecture here in Australia. So this is the show where we talk about innovations, best practices, and as many of the hows of building SaaS as we can. Today's show is removing SaaS from your SaaS network with Alkira. And it is absolutely my pleasure to have two people from Alkira today. As a brief intro to Alkira, so let me read exact wording so I get this right. So Alkira has reinvented networking for the cloud era by delivering cloud area networking, the first global unified network infrastructure with on-demand, hybrid, and multi-cloud connectivity, integrated network and security services, end-to-end visibility, controls, and governance, all delivered as a service. As an aside and a bit of awesome trivia, so Alkira is from the Aboriginal word for blue sky. And according to some sources, a happy place in the sun, which is a fantastic name. So as an intro today, I have David Klebanov, who is the Director of Partner Solutions Architecture. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much, Christopher, for having me.
You're welcome. And William Collins, Principal Cloud Architect.
Glad to be here.
Welcome, guys. It is a pleasure to have you on, and there's a lot of really awesome stuff to talk about today that I think AWS customers and companies in general will find incredibly useful about what Alkira does and what Alkira can offer. So, David, maybe I'll throw over to you as a whether you can expand on that intro to Alkira and just give the audience a bit more of who you are and what you do.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Christopher. So yes, I'll expand. Obviously, we have a lot of cool things we wanted to show you guys today, including, of course, a hands-on demonstration that William is going to show you some really cool stuff, how to drive an Alkira solution. So we'll start off with some kind of baselining, like what the problem statement was when we started the company, where we're going, what exactly is it that we do before we jump deeper into the actual sort of demonstration, hands-on, and into the weeds of what we want to show you today. So we started our company 5 years ago, back in 2018. And the idea behind the company back then was what happens to networking and network security in the world that is becoming increasingly dominated by cloud, and not just cloud as a technology, right? Not just the AWS, right, of the world, but also cloud as the way of thinking, right? How does network sort of operate in this world of hyperscale, in the world of global presence, in a world where, the time to market is measured in minutes and hours and not, weeks and months, right? So a lot of pressure on networking and network security. And that's when we kind of, put our minds together and said, we need to create something new. We need to create something different. We need to create a solution that is going to cater to all of these cloud transitions that were happening 5 years ago. And if we fast forward to today, they have greatly accelerated, right? But even 5 years ago, we could already see the trend of this increased cloud adoption. And the idea is that how do we create the network with all of these attributes of global presence, elastic scale, easy consumption models, really fast time to service. So all of these attributes that are important in the world of cloud, how do we bring those? How do we infuse those into the cloud, into the network infrastructure? And how do we build a network that takes the enterprises to the cloud, meaning building a hybrid cloud environment of an existing data center deployments plus the cloud environment like AWS? What happens once you arrive in the cloud, right? And you start scaling inside the cloud to a multi-region deployments. And then eventually, some of the customers are looking into diversifying into multiple clouds and going beyond a single cloud solution. So it was a kind of a holistic thinking of getting to the cloud, expanding inside the cloud, and then growing further with multi-cloud. At the same time, not forgetting the fact is that we need to support, let's call it legacy, which is the on-prem networking of branches communicating with other branches communicating to data centers. That is not like purely cloud-bound connectivity, but it's like I said, it's a legacy of a networking world that is still out there so much that connects all the cloud sort of on-premise assets together, right? So it was a pretty complicated problem to solve, and we said we need some because there was really nothing out there that could solve it all holistically in kind of one shot. We said, okay, it's time for us to do something different, something new to the market.
That's amazing. That is look, the amount of customers that we talk to who have complicated networks in the background, and a lot of companies still, cloud is still new to them, and so networking becomes complicated. And it can be hard to learn. It can be hard to find those skills as well. So Alkira coming in and having something that is really a service to go help that is amazing. I think there's a lot of companies out there who can use this straight away, and who may not even know that there was a solution out there to begin with to even help them with this problem. So David, at the moment, how is Alkira's solution different to the other cloud networking solutions out there?
Yes, excellent question, and I think you kind of alluded to the answer a minute ago when you said as a service, right? So one of the really key cornerstones of our solution when we kind of set on building it out was to mimic and give the network the characteristics of the cloud, and one of the most important characteristics was the as a service delivery. So what we really kind of differentiated between ourselves and every other solution that existed 5 years ago and also exists until now is the as a service nature of delivering these advanced networking and network security capabilities. And on this particular slide, it kind of provides, a state of what the cloud networking looks like today. What are different options that people are enterprises are looking at when they think about cloud networking, and those stretch from purely single cloud native solutions, right, which are good for a single cloud deployment in a more simplistic topologies, but start falling short on a multi-cloud deployments or more advanced networking capabilities. There is a co-locations which are anchored on physical or virtual infrastructure residing outside of the cloud and patching into the cloud through things like Direct Connect, right? There's things that have sort of evolved on a software-defined front, like SD-WAN technologies with cloud on-ramps, which is the on-prem SD-WAN technology that has an ability to be extended into the sort of a front door of the cloud infrastructure. And finally, there are a cloud overlay solutions, like a cloud software solutions that allow you to deploy an agent type of solution inside the cloud and build purely cloud overlay networks with controller, right? So all of these this entire set of solutions, there are different pieces that these solutions address. And what we said is that the common thing behind them is the do-it-yourself nature, where the enterprises or organizations of any sizes are pretty much given some specific tool set to take them from zero to something, but then they're left at that something and say, okay, from now on, you have to figure out what happens next. So we said, okay, we want to have a different approach to say that we are going to create this service, which is powered by our cloud infrastructure that I'm going to talk about in my next slide. But that service powered by our cloud infrastructure is going to give you an end-to-end sort of networking experience of what it takes to operate the networks in this cloud era.
Look, honestly, it sounds like magic. And I will very much enjoy seeing how it works. So what's your ideal customer profile? Like who is this for?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? We do not discriminate against customers of different sizes or customers belonging to different industry verticals. We are a network provider, right? Every organization needs a network, be that some smaller organization, mid-size, large enterprise, very large enterprise, or be those organizations that are operating in healthcare and finance and retail verticals and whatnot, right? Because the network is the network, right? We basically our customer profile stretches across all of it. We have customer representation from pretty much every size of an organization and every vertical of industry.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Let's dive into now. We're going to have a lot of very technical folk on the chat on the stream this morning. So let's look at what the architecture looks like.
Yes. So let me talk about the architecture, which is going to be very important to understand when you see the demonstration. What exactly are you seeing, right? So this will connect in your mind. What is it? Okay. So we said that we set to create this a cloud networking service, right? We call this service Alkira Cloud Services Exchange, right? And in fact, you can think about this as a cloud network as a service. So an enterprise would basically sign up for this service in a similar fashion that that you consume SaaS services today. So we don't say that we are a SaaS service, but it has a little bit of that SaaS-like feeling that you are basically logging into the portal, you have your authentication, you get into this sort of a design canvas, and you start building out your private network. And under the hood of that network that you're building is running the Alkira's cloud infrastructure, the cloud platform that that allows you to basically build out your network in almost like point and click fashion. Right. So what is this platform? What are the parts of this platform? So what you see on the slide is kind of an architecture of the platform. The blue canvas that you see, that's the Alkira canvas, and on this canvas you see those hexagon shapes that we're calling a cloud exchange point. So think about an Alkira as like a service provider, like cloud network, and the cloud exchange points are like points of presence on that network. These cloud exchange points are think about those as advanced routers with an ability to integrate security and network services like firewalls, like DNS, DHCP, IPAM services, and others, right? So this is like an advanced service provider point of presence that you sign up for and say, I want one in Sydney, I want one in Singapore, I want one in Frankfurt, I want one in US East Coast and West Coast. And the reason that you can select all of those is because the infrastructure, our cloud infrastructure, runs on top of the cloud providers infrastructure like AWS. So we are leveraging AWS as our foundation for building our service on top, and that's why we can basically scale the reach of that platform to anywhere AWS has presence.
Yep, amazing. Are there regions where are you operating in all of the major regions? Are there regions where you're not operating specifically?
Yeah, so good question. Pretty much any AWS commercial region, including, let's say, a region in China as well. Any commercial region that AWS operates can be added into the platform. And today we are in about 35 or so different cloud regions across AWS, but also other cloud providers. And we keep on growing our infrastructure based on customer need. So when we have a customer who comes to us and says, my cloud team is deploying cloud workloads in this particular location, or I have my physical sites and data centers in that location, or I have some users in that geography. So based on where the requirements are, we say, okay, you need to basically, what is the closest cloud exchange point to where you are? And if that Cloud Exchange point already exists in our platform, then you can just go and select it and save it, and this is it. You've extended your network there. And if not, then we basically go and in a matter of hours provision a Cloud Exchange point for that particular region, and then it becomes available not only to the customer who requested it, but also to every other customer, because the infrastructure that we are operating, it's a service provider like multi-tenanted infrastructure in the cloud. So it's not that we're building this for every customer.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so I guess there are two other caveats here, right? So if you are using, for example, AWS Direct Connect, or if you're a SD-WAN customer, is Alkira still an option?
Absolutely, yes. So we have customers. Obviously, everyone before they go to the cloud, they had a data center, and most of the enterprises, when they had data centers, they used things like Direct Connect to connect into the cloud. So the story of Alkira is that now, instead of connecting Direct Connect straight into the cloud workloads through things like Direct Connect Gateway and Transit Gateway, and then connecting to the VPCs, what we are saying is that now that Direct Connect goes into the Alkira's infrastructure, so it terminates on Alkira's cloud presence, cloud accounts. And once it hits the cloud account, it basically connects this data center with Direct Connect into the Alkira Cloud Exchange point. That Cloud Exchange point, in turn, will take that traffic anywhere that it needs to go. So we're kind of inserting ourselves in the middle of the Direct Connect and saying, bring your Direct Connect to Alkira. Alkira will deliver your traffic to everywhere it needs to go through the cloud network that we operate.
Right.
So,
okay. Awesome.
So that's the data center. And for SD-WAN solutions, we have a fair amount of customers who have been basically building their on-prem WAN fabrics using SD-WAN provider of their choice, and there's plenty of those to choose from. And now they're coming and saying, well, my SD-WAN provider has some cloud capabilities, some cloud on-ramp capabilities, but those, as I mentioned earlier, bring me to the kind of a doorstep of the cloud, and then after that, I kind of need to integrate myself how my actual application VPCs are connecting. So, and how do I insert my, let's say Palo Alto firewalls or Fortinet firewalls or Checkpoint firewall. SD-WAN provider is that you can take your SD, and once it's routing and service insertion and the automation to the network, so the experience becomes much more.
David, I think we're having.
I think we lost you, David.
Yeah.
SD on the cloud side, when SD-WAN Fabric connects into this cloud network, and it becomes kind of a better. I'm still here.
I think we got part of that, David, and I think we got generally the gist of it.
Okay.
There was some in and outs there. Yeah. I think one important thing too, David was kind of getting into was most companies today, they don't use one platform, they don't use one service, they don't use one of anything. It's oftentimes a mishmash of a lot of different security products, a lot of different, just different tools, whether it's SaaS, whether they're building infrastructure as a service, and maybe they have on premises, maybe they don't. So one of the big value propositions, and one of the things that we hear from our customers is, hey, this is what I have. I already have X, Y, and Z. I already have these teams that have done a lot of engineering, a lot of design around a certain product, like maybe a next-gen firewall or some security point solution. And this is how we do incident response. Can you integrate that? And that's one of the things that we take really seriously, is whatever is going to make our customers successful, choosing the best of breed tooling and really giving them a unified interaction surface to be able to stitch all these parts of the network together. Really big for our customers today.
Can you guys hear me? Am I back?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
We can't see you though.
I turned off my camera. I don't know, the wonders of live broadcast. Yes.
That might be for, we'll see how this goes. Yeah, it is, the lovely trial of live streaming. So there's a couple of really core questions here to determine, the applicability of this and the usefulness of this in terms of like going above and beyond, right? Because we have, there's a lot of AWS customers where networking is difficult because of their own setup and the sort of expanse of what they are trying to build. So you did mention here, how does it help, like for a customer that needs multi-cloud? Where does Alkira sit on that, and how does it, I guess, alleviate the difficulty of that?
Right. That's a very good question. Many of our customers are single cloud customers, but also many of our customers are multi-cloud customers, right? And again, our approach in here is that, and you can clearly see this on this diagram, is that we are that service provider type of environment that sits in the middle, that cloud infrastructure that gets you connected, that gets your security services going. And the customer connects their workloads into that infrastructure in those respective regions where those workloads reside. Now, those workloads can be an AWS workload, and if an organization decides tomorrow that they want to do, let's say, virtual desktops, and they chose Microsoft's product, and they now need to connect, VNets. The amount of effort that goes into connecting VNets is the same effort that it takes to connect VPCs, right? In both cases, there is no need to learn any underlying technologies that power AWS's network or Azure's network or Google Cloud's network or Oracle's network. Which are the four main clouds we support today. And basically everything is done in a very network-centric view, because the operator of our environment is many times a networking person, and we know that they are challenged with kind of cloud skills. So the idea is that how would a network person with no to very limited knowledge of the cloud, how would that person build a network that services the cloud? They obviously they would need to learn the cloud, right? Like how would they be able to do it, right? Okay, so the answer is no, they don't have to learn the cloud, because what they do in our system, they go in and they say, well, I have this what we call a connector, and this connector happens to be an Azure connector, and this connector has some properties. For example, I'm going to allow 1 gig of connectivity for that connector. I'm going to place this connector in a specific network segment for isolation. I'm going to assign things like billing tag to that connector, so I can do things like chargeback. I can assign this connector to a group of connectors, so it can inherit a common policy, right? So things like that absolutely have nothing to do with underlying cloud, and then click a button, and then we take over with automation and make all the necessary configurations, both on Alkira side, but also on the customer's account side. So we will go into that VNet, right? Obviously having the right access permissions to do that. We would go into the, which is kind of a prerequisite, right? But we would go and we would set the configurations in that VNet. For example, we would set up things like VNet peering. If this was an AWS VPC, we would set up something like a transit gateway attachment, so that VPC that a customer has their applications sort of running in is going to be automatically connected into the transit gateway that operates within the Alkira's platform. So they don't have to learn what transit gateway is, because they never see the transit gateway. It's not in their account, right? It's in Alkira's account, and we basically automate that attachment and route propagation of those subnets from that VPC into the transit gateway. Right. So we have this approach of that every cloud is treated equally simple, right? With the same number of attributes that you have to provide. And it doesn't matter that those clouds are vastly different from the way that they are implemented under the hood. The reality is that from the user, from the operator standpoint of this environment, which is like a network engineer most of the time, they don't need to learn any of that underlying stuff. All they need is just operate on the Alkira surface and just define a couple of attributes, and puff connector comes up.
Amazing. So, like I said before, it completely does sound like magic. So maybe let's see a demo. William, let's see it in action.
Yeah, let me just before we throw this to William, I just wanted to show you kind of what William is going to build.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's have a look.
Yeah, so I'll just so the idea here is that since we're talking about SaaS, right? First of all, you can think about Alkira as a SaaS networking, right? But beyond the fact, we are like, well, how would you, as an enterprise, how would you build your own SaaS offering to your customers, right? And it could be a SaaS service that you operate, but it could also be things like e-commerce for you're operating an e-commerce website that people come and shop around. Or maybe you are a healthcare provider and you have a telehealth system that people need to connect over the internet. Maybe you're a financial customer and you have some sort of an e-banking service that you want your customer to access. So the commonality between all of them is that these are internet-facing applications that need to be accessed by users that are sitting on the internet. And these are not VPN users. These are not your trusted users. These are your sort of clients. They are untrusted. They're connecting through the internet front door, but they need to be sort of funneled into your web front end. And that has to be scalable, globally distributed, secured. And so that's what we're building, this internet-facing applications that an enterprise wants to run, sort of like a cloud DMZ environment that they want to run, and that all is connecting through Alkira. So in this case, we have this, you see this cloud exchange points that are thrown as a global network. They're all interconnected through the cloud backbone infrastructure. And then you have this layer of the SaaS front end, which is basically where your sort of web servers run, right? And they can run in AWS, but they can also run in other clouds. They are front-ended by a load balancer to make sure that every single sort of region of this multi-region platform has high availability, right? So that basically your backend. This is your telehealth. This is your e-banking. This is your e-commerce systems that are running there in the backend. And there's obviously connection, if needed, connection to the data center, because you might be pulling some data from the data center into this multi-region, or maybe a part of this multi-region SaaS platform actually still runs in a data center. So you might need that connectivity. And then there is the actual front end that is delivered through the Alkira's platform, which connects these remote clients through the internet, through the DNS and global load balancing infrastructure to hit those cloud exchange points. And once hitting those cloud exchange points, then passing through them, being inspected by the next generation firewalls that are in them, and then eventually hitting the load balancer and the web servers that are actually powering that SaaS platform, right? So that's kind of what William is going to show you how to build. Maybe not every single element of this, but this is the idea, kind of the art of possible of what you can do to launch this sort of your SaaS service or your internet-facing applications in a secured way through Alkira.
Awesome, thank you, David. All right, William, let's take a look.
Let's roll. Let's do this.
Here we go. All right.
So first things first, you sign up for the service, you come to a screen and you have to pick, where do you start? If you're building you have aspirations, you're building a SaaS, a new platform, you don't begin by being globally available with, excellent SLAs and performance overnight. It just doesn't happen. You start somewhere, you build an MVP, you prove it out, and then you expand as demand increases, so on and so forth. So since I'm in the East Coast of the United States, I'm going to build my SaaS platform in the East Coast of the United States. So I'm going to select that location, and these little dots, these are representative of what David was talking about, these cloud exchange points, which are like cloud hosted points of presence, essentially. So I'm going to go ahead and add this CXP. So I have this added, and I'm going to be flipping back and forth with UI and with some automation, because one of the big, let's say one of the big drivers for our platform is, since we have a robust backend suite of APIs. Like we're built like the cloud. So when you think about a lot of the traditional hardware vendors, they started out with the hardware. Like they're starting like that is their North Star, because that's what made them money. And for a long time, that's just where the focus was. Cloud came along and, flipped over the table. So we're built on these back-end APIs, and they are, so like when I'm clicking things in this user interface and I'm doing things, it's actually, the logic is the back-end APIs. When I do a Terraform provider calls, the logic is back-end APIs. So everything is API driven.
Nice.
So first things first, I actually want to show just kind of a few snippets of what it would take, just kind of what the traditional workflow is and evolution of doing this natively. So say you're not using a solution like Alkira, you want to, test the waters yourself, you want to dip the toe in. So I put together just some examples, kind of some summaries of what I've seen. So I've got some local variables set up here, just 4 VPCs, or 4, dev, stage, prod, and shared. And usually what'll happen, so if a lot of times, even SaaS companies that only have like a single, like a product, they're still going to have a lot of VPCs, whether it's to isolate, compliance-based stuff, protected data, things like that, or for other reasons. Maybe they expand. Maybe there's additional lines of business and new product portfolios for that company. So I've got these right here, and then you can create these VPCs. Nothing to write home about. Create some subnets to add to the VPCs. So you see we're going like layer upon layer, but eventually you're going to say, okay, I have all these VPCs. Now they need to talk. But maybe, just maybe, my prod VPC, Sam Healthcare, prod VPC has, maybe some PHI data, protected data, stringent compliance, things like that. Whereas the non-prod environments are probably using synthetic data. There's not actual real customer data, hopefully not, in those lower level environments. So you also have, maybe some wrenches thrown in the tires as well, because you might have a shared services VPC where you have, instead of having an island for every VPC that you have in your environment, you have a shared services VPC in which other VPCs can interact with it. So we want to connect these VPCs, and the big transit gateway in AWS territory was probably my favorite thing ever released from AWS. Serverless this, serverless that, Kubernetes, like all these other things, just constantly. I was like, oh, the network needs some love. Come on. And Transit Gateway came along, and it was like, okay, this is great. So, but still with Transit Gateway, you run into some complexities. So this is a block of code that's going to create a Transit Gateway. I'm going to disable, so I can actually do some level of segmentation. I'm going to disable route table propagation, and also disable association as well. So then from here, I can actually attach, and I'm doing this just for brevity, to kind of keep it simple through all those VPCs from the local variables. And I'm just going to attach them all to the Transit Gateway in a loop. Easy peasy. And then I have some route table, let's see, association. So let's move to the segmentation file. So, okay, the VPCs, great. They are attached to the transit gateway, but they still can't talk yet. We actually need to configure the route table in the VPC to tell it, hey, this is how you get to the other networks. So this is essentially like a static route. So my destination is RFC 1918 space for the other VPCs, referencing the route table ID, and then I have the transit gateway ID. Okay, so now we're getting to the transit gateway. But now we, in order to do some level of segmentation between those environments, we have to create additional route tables on the transit gateway for those segments.
And just to be clear to everyone who's watching, this is all what you would need to do. We haven't even talked about how Alkira helps this situation. This is just, without Alkira, here are all the steps that you need to take.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so moving on. So, okay, so we have the additional route tables we've created. And look, this might seem, I made this actually look a lot more simple than what I see in the wild. Because a lot of times you haven't made and planned for all these things beforehand. You just don't. So you end up with kind of a mishmash of different things. So from here, we have the route tables created, but they're not doing anything. We're not advertising any routes. Nothing is happening. And they're not even attached to anything. Like you see here, like where's the VPC ID? Like how are they associated with anything? Well, they're not. So then we have to attach them. So there's a one-to-one mapping for the route table and the TGW attachment that we created for each one of these IDs. And I'm doing this all in the same file as well. Generally, I see a lot of, state file separation with Terraform across many environments, state files in different places, and they're referencing, they have connectivity to that state file, and they're actually pulling it in and referencing resource IDs from that state. So it can be pretty interesting in regards to that. So, okay, we've got them attached now. We have the association. Now we have to actually propagate routes, and we have to be very specific about it. So this block right here is going to say, hey, I'm going to propagate prod to the shared services. Okay. And then I also need to propagate routes for shared services segment dev. And so I'm going to just go ahead and open up some of these. And again, I mean, these are just, this is a basic 3-4 VPC example of just doing some extremely simple things. And one of the things that comes up a lot, like a lot of customers will actually get this far and they're kind of okay with it. If things are simple, if they're not going beyond like lots of VPCs, like some customers can have 100 plus. And of course it gets extremely complicated then. But they might be okay up to this point, but what really throws a wrench in the complexity is saying, okay, this is one region. We need to go to another region. And then, okay, like what if, the big one is, what if we have another cloud? Okay, how do we, we have this one segment in here. We have this one thing that this one cloud needs to talk to. Maybe it's going to sip some data from a data lake. Maybe it's, there's any number of things that you might do. Integration, acquisition, the story goes on. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave this behind and hop over back to Alkira. So I've set this
and we're talking about like critical infrastructure code here, where something goes wrong and your system is down, dead, right?
Yeah. And so it's funny, like cloud, I think the DevOps boom really brought a lot of cool and interesting automation ideas, pipelines. I've lived in that world for a long time. And I think one of the things that gets challenging is when you have attrition at a company and new people come in, it gets pretty complicated with a lot of those automations, and it's very easy to break things if you don't understand what you're doing. But so back to Alkira, just to summarize, we've got this east region with nothing in it, and it's really late for me here, so I'm on the East Coast of the United States. It's like close to 1 a.m. So if I seem a little slap happy, that's why. So my grandma actually used to tell me when I was a kid all the time. Whatever I was doing, I could be building like just playing with dirt in the backyard. She'd be like, you need to build a solid foundation. And then everything you do on top of that foundation is going to be pristine, but it has to have a good foundation. She still tells me this, like today.
Good advice.
So I can't think of anything that is prevalent with that more than networking, because you build a network and your foundation isn't solid, you have issues way on up the stack. And then what I see is a lot of developers, software engineers doing tricks higher up the stack to make up for problems that are lower down on the stack where the network lives. So this is where Alkira, what we're going to do first is we're going to build a solid baseline, call it network bedrock, just a grand foundation. So I'm going to bootstrap all the segments, all the policies, like all the things that I'm going to do, not for just one region of AWS, but for all regions that I ever want to go to, for any clouds other than AWS that I ever want to connect. These resources that you're going to see here are global in scope, and they're applicable to just everything that you're going to connect to our platform over time. It can be Azure, GCP, same language, same deal. So I'm going to create these 4, we call them groups. It's like a micro segmentation mechanism of sorts. So what I can do with these groups is I can say, hey, I've got that dev and that stage VPCs. I can add them to that non-prod group, and then I can build a policy against that non-prod group. And so all the subsequent networks that I add in the future, just by adding them to that group, they inherit all that rich policy, all that intent. And I'm doing this before we even connect a network to Alkira. So I'm not even connecting a VPC. VPC doesn't even have to exist. So this is a big thing that our security, our advocates on the security side love, because it shifts left. We're building and we're putting the security, the network security in place long before anything's going over the data plane. So here's some examples of the policy. So like, let's say this first one right here, non-prod to shared. It's going to be in scope. From groups is non-prod, to groups is shared. And it's going to have this rule list set against it. So with our rules, we can basically say, hey, X can talk to Y, and then we can insert like a little tag saying, hey, we want it to actually go through a Palo Alto firewall, or we want it to go through this security point solution, or do this. We can make decisions on that. So I'm going to go ahead and run this real quick so we can just get this going. I don't want to run out of time here. So that's going to, this is going to create our baseline. And so if I go in here, like I'll see like these groups, I'll see, okay, we've got groups now, nothing's in them, nothing's connected, but we have some stuff here. And then like here's the policies I discussed that do these different things. So now we're going to move over to the networks. We want to connect something, make this interesting. So with the network,
can you go back? Can you go back to that file? How many lines of code was that? That just created that?
Not many. So defining all the groups for the segmentation is 6 lines of code, and then these policies, like a lot of these aren't even like mandatory fields, but yeah, just each policy block is just a few lines. And this is the only time you ever have to do this. You never have to touch these again unless you want to change that business intent. And the good thing is there's not any way to circumvent that from the VPC level. So traffic comes through, and it, if we're forcing that traffic through a firewall or something else, there's not, it really eliminates that shadow IT aspect of the whole thing.
Doubly.
So for connecting networks, I, go big or go home. So I have all these VPCs in the East. I just filled in these local variables just with names, what group I want to add them to, the region, the CIDR range. And then to actually add all those, I'm just filling in these values. So let's go back. And this is going to add, like this is actually adding these AWS VPCs to Alkira in real time here. Let's just make sure everything looks. Okay, so we got something. So
Hey,
we can see visually through the UI, like non-prod, we have that dev and that stage, prod, shared. And so like, okay, we have our, call this our prototype, our MVP. Well, we want to advertise. We have an application and we want to start testing it. We want traffic coming inbound to the application. So what we're going to do now is deploy what we call an internet-facing application. So let's switch over. Basically what this is, so think of it is, okay, you've built the like you have all the application running in AWS and you need to securely allow your customers to reach it. So, basically what's going to happen is with these, we're going to provide an FQDN for the application. We're going to manage the assignment of the public IPs, all the FQDN stuff. All you're going to have to worry about is pointing it to like the right load balancer, the ALB or the network load balancer, whatever you have on the other end that's in front of the application. And then, yeah, that's about it. So let's switch back over. So we have this internet facing application now.
There was a comment from Anthony, I believe, on the visualization aspect of Alkira and how unique that is. It's not common that you have a set visualization for networking, particularly cloud.
And that's a big thing too. So I'm someone that historically has not liked to use UIs. I'm in the CLI ever since I was in the Linux world way back. Like I would go out of my way to write a bash script before I would do anything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really love using our UI because I'll tell you what, right here, this only shows like 4 VPCs. But imagine having hundreds of VPCs or hundreds of VPCs, VNets in Azure, GCP VPCs. We have some pretty big customers that have a lot of networks connected, and being able to visualize them and even take the policy, for example, like those policies I created. Let's look at this non-prod to shared. So when I click on this policy, a little eyeball here, it's going to show me only the things that are in scope for that policy.
Oh, amazing.
So when I do have thousands of things in here, it's going to shrink it down to that policy and only show me what I need to see, which is extremely useful.
Awesome. That is super useful.
So now...
Also, I just wanted to make sure, sorry, William, a second. I just want to make sure people understand is that we're not a tool for visualization, right? We are, what William is doing here, he is building a full-blown enterprise cloud network. He just happens to use Terraform. It happens to use Terraform to do it, right? But in fact, we're building a full-fledged network here. We're not just like a pretty UI for Terraform. Right?
So our story moves on. Our hypothetical SaaS platform, it's doing well. We've got customers, and we need to move to a different region. We have customers on the West Coast, and they're, coming all the way back to the East Coast over the internet, and things are slower. So being good stewards and wanting to grow our platform, we want to expand to the West Coast of the United States. So I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to add a West CXP. And if I look at it, nothing there. It's completely blank. Don't have anything connected. So since I already built, that baseline that I talked about, all I have to do now is connect networks again. So I'm going to go back to the locals here and just uncomment this block for all these West networks. And then I'm going to uncomment this. And then rerun the Terraform plan. And we should see some networks start. Come on, West Coast. There we go. So we have we've taken that same design, those same security principles, all that business intent, and we've connected our networks from West Coast for our SaaS application. But we also have the internet-facing application aspect of it. So we want that application to come in through the West Coast, to provide better performance for our end users. So I'm just going to uncomment this little block here. Run this again. And we should see that IFA come in. Yep, there we go, right there. So one thing I want to sort of I want to take a little bit of time for. I know we're getting to the top of the hour, but one of the things we see a lot of is there's a lot of security solutions out there. There's a lot of compliance needs, just a lot of things going on that are, it is just the way it is. So one of the things we see a lot is, customers saying, hey, is there any way this traffic that's ingressing, we want it to go to this security solution, or we want it to do this, we want it to do that. So we make that pretty seamless. So what I'm actually going to do is in one swoop, I'm going to take and deploy some Palo Alto next-gen firewalls for both of these regions. So I'm basically going to define instances here. Now I could just add more blocks for more instances to auto scale organically. But I'm just having one instance since this is a demo. And one of the cool Alkira specific features we have in our partnership with Palo Alto is being able to map zones to groups. So we have this SaaS factory like overarching segment. And I want to say, hey, this prod group is going to map to the prod zone on the firewall. And then non-prod, and I can do this for anything. So if you already have zones on your firewall, like you have, it kind of goes back to like, okay, meeting the customer where they are today and being able to get them to where they want to be in the cloud. So one of the unique features that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And this is going to, here we go. So let's just make sure we got it in East as well. Okay. And you know what? I didn't actually make a policy to steer. I forgot about it. Well, let's just do it right now. I'm going to go in here.
Can you zoom in? William, can you zoom into that graph a little bit?
Yeah,
just in there. Okay, there we go. Okay. Just to make sure everyone can see that.
So I didn't create a policy to actually steer that incoming traffic through the firewall, so might as well do it live here and show off the UI a little bit more. So let's just call it FA East.
In the meantime, I've also posted 2 videos on the chat in Twitch. That is, one is using DevOps and Terraform for cloud networking, and then also building an AWS cloud network in 7 minutes on Alkira. So for anyone who's looking for other videos on how to do this, they're linked in the chat.
So if you do want to create a policy, by the way, through the UI, this is how easy it is. Just save policy. And so this is going to steer that traffic in the East Coast coming in for that application through the firewall. And I can visualize that pretty easy.
Nice.
Like so. And that's about that. So is the whole point being, I remember that building with Legos that Netflix blogged about it back in like 2012. I can't even remember. And
Yeah.
I always remember like years after that thinking, why can't we build with the Legos with the network? It just never happened. And this
Absolutely.
solution is really that solution where you can build with Legos. Like you need
Mhm.
one solution
Mhm.
integrated, you can use it, you stop using that, you can discard it, bring on the next thing, and
Yep.
grow this organic solution globally.
Yeah, look, this is what you presented is phenomenally unique in the industry, and there's a huge amount of companies that can benefit from this, right? You know, first talking about Alkira, and there are just so many companies who this would make their lives phenomenally easier. So this is fantastic, guys. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're about 4 minutes from time. Is there anything else you either of you would like to say before we close out here?
No, I think we covered a lot of good topics today about like why Alkira was born, what kind of problem we're solving, and also gave you guys a real-time example of what it takes to deploy internet-facing applications with security and sort of multi-region high availability and performance. So I think we covered a lot of ground today. And if anybody has any particular questions that they want to address, anything they want to learn more about our solution, or they want to explore how that applies to their own environment, we're happy to entertain the conversation. You can always reach us individually, right? David@alkira.com and William@alkira.com. Or you can always go to our website, which is alkira.com, right? And where you'll find a lot of interesting things.
Yeah, that's awesome. Look, the when you started describing this, I said it looked like magic, and you proved that it works.
Yeah.
You know, that it phenomenally works and it's easy. And networking is usually not that at all. So super appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. So the links are in the Twitch chat. What I'll do is I'll also put them in LinkedIn for anyone that is on LinkedIn Live. And links to everyone's LinkedIn profiles are in there as well. For anyone who does want to get in touch with Alkira, but like David said, alkira.com is the website. This has been super helpful. And look, I think out of this, there's going to be a lot of people who will want to check this out. This show will also go onto YouTube for anyone who is not watching live, for anyone who wants to link this show. So thank you, William. Thank you, David. It's been a pleasure. And thanks, William, for staying up so late. I didn't realize what time it was.
All good.
Yeah. All right. Thanks,
Chris.
guys. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This has been another episode of Building SaaS on AWS, and this time with Alkira. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having us.